Sophie's cough boyfriend, Patrick Gradden Keefe, was interviewed recently.
Why is he not replying to my messages? It's just getting very awkward now. And this was a burn book which revealed the sordid, hidden lives behind Emperor Justinian's court.
Did you just compare Anecdota to Mean Girls burn books?
Kind of, yeah.
Donna Tartt
is immortal.
She might not be one of us.
Hello and welcome back to the Bibliophiles. I'm Sophie.
And I'm Chaya.
And we are thrilled to get started on today's conversation. But before we do, we just want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to us, whether you're at home, whether you're doing the laundry, whether you're on your commute to work. We so appreciate your time and we really hope you enjoy today's episode.
Now, I have come dressed for today's episode very specifically, and I know that for those of you who are listening, you may not be able to see. So I am wearing a white shirt with a tie.
Tied
and
by
a blazer.
me, can I please add? Yes, I tied that.
I can't tie a blazer because I am channeling the author who I think is close to God for me now.
The only thing missing is the appropriate haircut. You would need a very short, very sharp black bob, but perhaps that's something we can look into later.
And the entire book, every other line is about smoking, and I do feel like I need a cigarette, but that's not going to be taking place. Today's episode is a deep dive into the secret history, and this may have made a few of you delirious with excitement. Some of you may think, oh God, that book that I haven't read that's mentioned everywhere I go.
All over social media still, many years after it was published.
Well, it is genre defining, blending, but also it started a movement. And I have to say, and I feel like I need to because it would be misrepresentative if I didn't, we both reread this for this episode. I came to it in a very arrogant way. I was like, oh, I read this years ago. I'm probably not going to love it. I'm probably just going to be like, oh yeah, it's great, but whatever. And within the first 10 pages, I thought, this book is going to ruin everything for me because I'm never going to read a better book. And it reminded me of that. And now every book is annoying.
Well, I'm not a rereader. In fact, the only book that I've reread, and I've mentioned it before, is The Prayer of Owen Meany by John Irving. But when we said that we were going to deep dive into this and we really, really wanted to do it justice, I felt that I had to reread it. And what was particularly interesting for me, and I'll touch on it more later, was how I actually saw the characters very differently this time. And what I thought about one character in particular was very different to how I originally saw that person when I read it, however many years ago.
It's fascinating when that happens.
There will be spoilers in this. So, bear that in mind. But actually, the interesting thing about this book is that Donna Tartt actually spoils it in the first line when we learn that there has been a murder and we know who's died and we know who's killed them. So all is revealed very early on, but we should say there are spoilers that will relate to the rest of the story. But whether you've read it or whether you haven't, this is a deep dive that you don't want to miss.
And why you don't want to miss it is because this book is such a critical piece of work in literature. It has changed, I actually think it's changed society.
It's a cult and contemporary classic.
Absolutely. So what we want you to gain from this is, if you haven't read it, you'll be able to fake it. Darlings, you'll be in a dinner party and you'll be able to go, yeah, no, of course. And you'll sound so clever. If you love the book, you will hear our passion. We will tell you, we have researched this for hours and hours. I am a classical fiend.
Here are the notes.
Oh my God. Sophie has written an essay, like a thesis. And if you're a student and you're going in English language or literature, this may help you because you may want to reference this book, or you're in classics. There's something for everyone because this book is for everyone.
It is. And that's what's so special about it. And it's why we picked it. I would genuinely feel more than delighted to recommend this to anybody and think they will love it. You can't say that about any book at all. I actually think no caveats. Anybody could read this and would love it, in my opinion.
And when we say anybody, we actually don't mean anybody in as distinct, in distinct parameters. I think if you are not really a reader and you pick up a Frida McFadden in the airport on the way to holiday, or you're not a reader at all. I've got friends who are not readers at all, but they are obsessed with true crime and they would watch a Netflix documentary on the psychology of a serial killer. They would love this book. And it's very clever. And there's a lot of references that if they go over your head, it doesn't matter because the propulsivity of this book is ridiculous.
And I've done this with you many times. I've likened this to something like Friends or The Simpsons. But the reason is, I think with shows like that, you can watch them when you're a kid and understand and appreciate them on a level. And then you can watch them later in life. So and they take you to another level entirely. This is so multi-layered that when you come back to it, it's just like peeling another layer off and getting into it in a completely different way. And I love that we can talk about it like this because we've both reread it and just been completely enraptured by it once again, but in a different way.
We have. And so this is The Secret History as a genre-defying and blending archetype. It's a campus novel. We are going to give you lots of information about it. It does contain multitudes, it's a thriller without cheap suspense. It's a philosophical novel without pedantry. It's a classical tragedy without distance. And we came to this because I was so bothered by our a few episodes ago where we were talking about AI books and
Shy Girl scandal.
And it's really bothered me because I just feel like the more we put into AI, the more it's going to produce. And it starts me thinking are we at the precipice of where human creativity is going to be stopping? And we've always wanted to do a deep dive. I want to do a 3-hour Homeric lecture.
You wanted Orwell. We talked about Orwell.
We are doing Orwell.
We will do that.
Orwell. Tell us if you want us to do Orwell, if you love this.
Yeah, or just let us know what you'd like us to do next anyway.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So we want to kind of flex our intellectual muscles. We are academics in our hearts. I think I definitely am. As much as I'm a barrister, I would love to be an academic in archaeology. And we wanted to kind of really delve into a text that had huge cultural importance. And then with the AI book, as I was reading this, I was thinking, A, Donna Tartt is God, and B, no AI will never be able to replicate this. The amount of references and the humanity in this book.
But I think whatever prompt you put into chat, even if it was sort of a 10,000 word detailed prompt, you'd never get this book.
Never.
Impossible.
Donna Tartt, I don't know how she's able to bring so many references together and know every aspect of every type of human that's ever existed, because I feel like they're all represented, but also make it able to cater to the Frida McFadden reader who loves a propulsive thriller, which, okay, this is a much more advanced level, but it's brilliant, to a true crime, to a classical scholar who thinks this is clever. How did she do it?
But I think for us in particular, there is so much about this book that speaks to us in terms of our personality. Yes, you mentioned the academics. I also think that, for me personally, I've always loved those books that are generally seen as darker, not specifically dark academia necessarily, but things that are darker and the stories of people who, are quote unquote ordinary, who end up getting swept up in extraordinary and shocking circumstances, which this very, very much is. There's this real twisted element, and I love that kind of thing. It's just, give me more of that, please.
And to get a bit personal, I just think it speaks to who we are as people. So if you don't know us and this is the first time you're coming across us, I'm a criminal barrister, but I wanted to do archaeology as a child. I was reading learning hieroglyphics at 10. My parents did not know what to do with me. Kids want to go to a park. I'm like, can we go to the British Museum? I was that nerd. I taught myself Latin. I went to a school that did not offer any kind of classics or educational value. It was really fun though. And I wanted to
tag them in the comments.
Yeah, no, they know that. And it was a great school, made the best friends of my life. But what did I gain intellectually? Not quite sure. But so I taught myself Latin out of school and I did the GCSE and AS level. I've always loved reading classics, literature, art. I was a bit of a nerd. And when I went to UCL and did law, I was surrounded by people from private school that had the most phenomenal education, and they all thought that I was one of them because I could make the classical jokes they were making. But I was this like kid from a school that, you know, I'm the first barrister from that school. I think from a girl, maybe it was an all-girls school. So I definitely think from the girl side of things, definitely. And I just see so much of myself in so many of these characters. Not that I've killed anyone. But
not a spoiler, it's in the first line.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think it does the same thing for you.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I actually originally worked in publishing, but I read history at Oxford, and that for me was an amazing experience, but one in which, I mean, I really, in many ways, I do relate to our narrator, and we'll hear more about him, Richard Papin. But being an outsider, I didn't know anybody when I got to Oxford. Nobody from my school had ever been there. So to end up there in this completely different world, I absolutely loved it. But there's so much in The Secret History that resonates with me on that level. And in fact, I read it first time around the time I was starting, and it just completely made a lot of sense.
So interesting. We should say also, before we tell you what's coming up in this deep dive and the categories of what you're going to be hearing, Sophie, a part of your in personality is that I think if I cut you would bleed coffee.
That's probably true and a little bit frightening. But yes, I am a big coffee drinker, and our sponsors, London Nootropics, have actually really helped me with that, because I have been drinking considerably less coffee since we engaged with them on our podcast. They have a brilliant brand of adaptogenic coffees, which I have started drinking every single morning, which has meant that I only need 1 cup of coffee each morning, their coffee, and I'm not suffering with the jitters by lunchtime, which has been a real problem for me.
Because the adaptogens in their coffee mixtures kind of enhance the benefit of the caffeine that is included. And we are very, very delighted to have a code for you, which is Biblio. So if you do, it's a luxury item, guys. It's beautifully packaged.
The packaging is a bit Charlotte Tilbury-esque. One of my daughters pointed that out. They thought I'd got a new Charlotte Tilbury eyeshadow set.
Can you imagine their disappointment? Yeah. What is this, mummy? But so please do look them up online, and our code Biblio will get you a nice discount. So what will you be listening to? So first, we are going to look at some background and context and structural analysis of the plot.
Yep. Then we'll be moving on to the cast and their psychologies, which will then be followed on by key moments, narrative devices. We'll also be touching on themes, and we'll be closing with books that we think you'll love if you've loved Secret History.
Or you're interested in the classics and you want to know where to go.
Yeah, I actually want to know more of that, because I feel like I would have loved to have learned classics too.
Can I just say, like, coming today to the studio, I got to bring all my books. I am surrounded by my babies, and obviously Medusa, who is our...
If you can't see her, we have a bust of Medusa.
It's not really Medusa. Our producer keeps on telling me it's not blinking Medusa. It looks like Aphrodite or someone else. But I call her Medusa before the gods interacted with her, because she is the first victim, the archetype. Anyway, I was able to bring all my bookies. So I'm surrounded by Milton and Dante and Emily Wilson. And I am honestly I'm having the best day of my life.
Yeah, no, and we've genuinely loved doing this. So
thank you for giving us the opportunity, because this has been the best thing ever.
So we're going to start with a bit of background. Now, I actually had never heard Donna Tartt speak before I started this deep dive, and she's given very, very few interviews, but the ones that you can initially find on YouTube are around the time of publication.
She's very elusive. She's like
She really is. So The Secret History was published in September of 1992, and Donna Tartt was 29 at the time. This was her debut novel, and she got an advance of something like, I'm not sure if this is actually made up, but I think it was about $450,000, which...
Are you serious?
Yeah, which I think you know how people go, in today's money, I think in today's money, that's just over $1 million. The immediate reception was really quite amazing. A lot of people loved it.
This is before social media, but I feel like it became like an organic...
I think there probably was a bit of criticism, but there was a lot of positive reception. And actually, Donna Tartt in interviews has said that she was really surprised by that. It was not something she expected at all. And she actually mentioned that there had been a flood in Miami around the time of the publication. And at an event in the city, there were people there who had said when the flood hit, one of the things they ensured they took from their homes was their copy of the secret history. Yes. I actually would love to find that and put it in the show notes. I'm really going to make a note, Miami comment show notes, because otherwise I'll forget. And I just think it speaks so much to what this book meant to people even then.
Even then, with no influencers, no one going viral anywhere. It's a word of mouth. And it's weird because I have to say again, like hands up, I think, I don't want to come across as more educated than I am. Like, I thought this was a much older book. Like when I started researching, I was like, how old was I? 4, right? I was like, what? I thought this was written, because it's had such a huge cultural impact. And people talk about her so reverentially. And like any writer, like, okay, Sophie's boyfriend, Patrick Gradden Keefe, was interviewed recently.
Why is he not replying to my messages? It's just getting very awkward now. God.
Is he? Are you? Do you want to talk about this?
No. We can save it for after.
Are you having an affair?
No. It's just save it for after.
I mean, is he your hall pass? Okay, no, I'm stopping. Anyway, and so Patrick Gradden Keefe talks about the secret history, and like he's very important to Sophie, and he's a very impressive and important writer and journalist, and he is changing the world literally one book at a time. And when I saw, his comments about the secret history, like it just feels that kind of book that it's a bit like 1984. The language from the secret history has suffused our language. There's an entire genre of dark academia, which it's considered to be the genesis of, which I actually don't think is appropriate because it's so much more. It's weird that it's so young.
No, and the impact is so big.
Weird.
The book actually was originally going to be called The God of Illusions, which I love, but because I think actually illusion is arguably the main thing that this novel cautions us against as readers. But it was then changed, and I'm not sure why it was changed, but I do know that I believe it was called The Secret History, as a nod to Procopius, who was a 6th century Byzantine historian.
I am literally living my nerd dream.
And he wrote something called Anecdota, which is translated as The Secret History. And this was a burn book, which revealed the sordid, hidden lives behind Emperor Justinian's court. I mean, there we go.
Can I just ask you a question? Did you just compare Anecdota to Mean Girls burn books?
Kind of, yeah. But isn't that our whole podcast vibe?
That we can talk about
high-low.
That is
like high culture, low culture.
Oh, I'm having the time of my life.
That.
Yes, for my sister and mum listening, I did order Anecdota the moment Sophie told me about this. No, I didn't have it already. If I'd had a proper education, maybe I'd have known about it.
But it's a really interesting point. I think it's always interesting to know why a title is a title.
So Donna Tartt is a writer deeply shaped by her classical education and insular academic culture. And the novel is not simply referencing antiquity, it's attempting to recreate a classical mindset. It is at least a partial retelling of the Bacchae by Euripides. And yes, I do have my Euripides here. An ancient Greek play first produced in 405 BCE. In Euripides' story, Dionysus, aka Bacchus, the god of theatre and wine, having the best day.
The god of wine.
In whose honour the great Dionysian festivals of plays were produced, exacts a terrible revenge on Pentheus, the king of Thebes, for denying his divinity. So long story short, a group of the god's worshippers tear the king apart with his bare hands in an ecstatic trance. And the Bacchanal is not symbolic, it's structural, which brings us beautifully to the structural analysis of the plot.
So we're going to go through the plot in a fair bit of detail, not too much, but one of the main areas that we have to concentrate on is, of course, the opening of this book.
Which is known to be, right? The opening is, I feel like so many writers try and recreate this.
This is the one.
This is the archetype.
This is the OG.
Should we show everyone who's watching the tabs?
Oh, yeah.
God, you've tabbed it more. I read it in a day. I reread it in a day.
I'm not
a very
sure.
fast
I think
reader.
we're pretty even.
No,
I think we're pretty even.
We're not. I wish I tabbed it more.
So let's start.
The opening is really
opening
important.
line, because it really is a key one. Prologue. The snow in the mountains was melting, and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation.
It's got everything. It's got suspense. But okay, I have to mention Hilary, because if I don't in every episode, something terrible will happen and people will think that I don't love her. Hilary Mantel always said that the most difficult thing about writing the trilogy on the Tudors was that nothing was going to be a surprise. And how do you keep people's attention when they know that Cromwell is going to die and Anne Boleyn is going to be beheaded? For me, Donna Tartt, I say this with bated breath, is on Hilary Mantel's level. She may have surpassed it for me. Don't have a heart attack. Don't faint.
I'm a little taken aback. This is the first time you've dropped that.
No, I didn't want to tell you before. I actually stopped myself voice noting you because I feel like she does that. She does what Hilary does, and Hilary is amazing. But I've always seen Hilary as like mortal. Donna Tartt,
is immortal.
She might not be one of us, because how does she cater to everyone? And
that's really incredible.
And B, this isn't just, oh, there's an opening and you know Bunny's died. It's, let me tell you, I ignored everyone in my life reading this. I actually had deep-seated anxiety reading this book. Like, I had to remind myself I hadn't killed him.
Well, and that level of anxiety and being on the edge, the suspense is there throughout the book. And I think it's really important to say that this was so deliberate. In fact, Donna Tartt has said that what she wanted to do was write a book where the murder and who did it was revealed at the very start. It was her whole point, in a way, of writing this. She wanted to do that. And she herself has commented on suspense and was she was very influenced by Hitchcock, who made a comment of the ilk that suspense is not watching someone chuck a bomb and it going off in a restaurant. Suspense is when you're watching two people sitting across the table from the other and you can see the bomb underneath the table and you're waiting for it to go off. And that is what Donna Tartt achieves so brilliantly. This is not a whodunit. We know who's done it. This is a detective story inverted, essentially. And it's so clever because actually what this is a why done it. We know who's done it. We have to know why. And that's really quite unique. And at the time, I don't think it had been done before. Maybe not in this context, but hello, what influenced Donna Tartt? There you go. The Iliad.
1 minute. What? You've got the Robert Fagles translation.
Yeah.
I'm holding in my hand an Emily Wilson translation. Emily Wilson is the coolest. She's a rock star, and she is retranslating the Iliad and the Odyssey from a feminist lens.
I really want to borrow that. I need to have that. I need to have
proof.
That.
It doesn't leave my house.
I don't think it was out when I got this. Is it quite new, that?
We got it a few years ago. The Odyssey is out. It's amazing. And it's not from a feminist lens, but a lot of the translations are by people like the people in the cast. Very misogynist, very elite. And there are words that have been translated like whore that could actually be other things. I'm not going to give you a 3-hour lecture on Emily Wilson.
That might be the next one.
If we got to interview her, I think I'd vomit. No. But it's so interesting. And yes, she was very much inspired by the Iliad. So from a structural analysis, you've got each phase, initiation, transgression, containment, and collapse, corresponds to a deepening moral compromise, I thought. We've both written essays on this that we're going to try and not read out. But by the time the second murder occurs, it feels less like a decision and more like the only remaining possibility within the logic the group has constructed. And I felt that very much felt true. I literally, can I tell you, we're going to talk about this and we're going to go through the characters. But whilst I was reading this book and I knew what was happening, it's like, he just has to die.
We'll come back to that.
He just has to die.
But I think what is key, you've got this opening, which Donna Tartt, I mean, you'd call it medios res, as in she starts in the middle. And this is very much influenced by the Iliad, where everything's effectively revealed in the first 6 lines. And then the story goes on with Richard's arrival at Hampden College.
So who is Richard?
Richard is a young man who has joined the exclusive college Hampton, having actually, well, he liked the look of the brochure.
In Vermont?
Yeah. He liked the look of the brochure.
He's a bit
I think
lost.
it was a bit of a shiny, glossy brochure. And he wanted to join. And he arrives, I want to find the bit where he arrives, but he arrives and he becomes completely captivated by a group of students who study Greek with the very eminent but mysterious professor, Julian Morrow. And he is completely drawn to this mysterious group. And he is desperate as an outsider to get in there.
Yes, so he is the narrator and he represents for me desire, his longing for community. He comes from quite a complicated, dysfunctional background. He doesn't fit in. He reinvents his background. I think that's important to say. He pretends to be like from California and have had a very glamorous life. He is also quite destitute, and it is very apparent very early on that the group of students come from tremendous wealth, or they appear to. And his narration aestheticizes everything, violence, decay, and fear. And he's considered an unreliable narrator, and I didn't think he was. But then you look this up.
I think I think he is an unreliable narrator because you see so many aspects of Richard as we go on, and how he tells the story that he wants to tell.
So interesting.
And it's fascinating. Yeah. And I think you're so in his head because the story's entirely told from his point of view. And I think what I like about Richard, but as in, you get the impression like the harder he realizes it's going to be to get into this group, the more desperate he is that he has to get in there. And he's told that Julian Morrow's classes are closed, that he only takes, I think, 5 students and he's full. He's going to find a way. The other point that I found on a random Reddit thread about Richard Papin, Donna Tartt says Papin, but I have seen a thread that kind of compares him and suggests that he is named after Franz von Papen. So as a history student, this really got me going because Franz von Papen was one of the German politicians, Franz von Papen and von Schleicher, who were both very involved in Hitler's rise to power. They both felt that they were able to control Adolf Hitler as he was rising through the ranks in Germany. And obviously, they didn't do a very good job of that. And I think it's really interesting to look at that name and look at these 2 men, and perhaps whether Henry is that Hitler-esque character moving up the ranks and then committing the crimes that he does.
Which Hitler definitely justifies. Which Henry does.
It's a really, I think, I'm not sure that there are any other Papins in literature, which is why that thread was started, drawing the 2 together. But I think it's a really compelling point.
Guys, if you hadn't realised, we have gone down every deep dive rabbit hole, and this book is so suffused with them that it's overtaken our lives.
I think that's why there are really big bags under my eyes.
I've got so much concealer on. So the next character, this essential character in this group, in this cast, in this dramatis personae, is Henry Winter. I'm having the best time. Who represents the belief that intellect can supersede morality. So he is obsessed with Julian. He's a little bit older. He's definitely very wealthy. Who did I cast him in my mind? Maybe a very austere Andrew Garfield. I want floppy hair.
Okay. I think Andrew Garfield looks a bit too sweet, cozy.
I need someone he's tall.
A bit more.
What I feel like about tall men.
You need someone a bit more. He looks too cozy.
What about Henry Cavill?
Oh, you love Henry Cavill. You love him.
Next on my list.
Maybe it could be him.
Oh, okay.
Well, and the name, but also we should mention that Henry's name, Henry Winter, is really significant.
Yes.
Because the use of the season winter for Henry, you'll see weather, pathetic fallacy, possibly my favourite term in practical criticism in English literature. Pathetic fallacy is a massive, massive part of this book. The weather really reigns supreme, and we'll come back to that.
Can I just say that when you talk about the housewives and all your trashy TV, I sometimes forget how clever you truly are. And then you're like, oh, my favourite term. But then I'm like, oh, she's so brilliant.
Harpen? But no, I think that it's, we're going to talk about the weather. We'll come back to it.
So Henry, for me, represents Apollonian intellect, the moral detachment, the philosopher king figure. And he also embodies distorted Platonism. I had the best time of my life researching this.
Be loving Henry. Totally.
I agree.
I think on Book Talk, it's a massive thing. I think he polarizes. He's the Marmite of this book.
So
you either love him, but really love him. And I think if I'd seen Henry Winter, walking around my college at Oxford, I would be following him.
Yeah, totally.
Definitely.
And actually the secret history, I'm dressed a bit like Donna Tartt, but also this is very secret history. I was looking at whether I had a tweed jacket. It's almost created an aesthetic, and Henry Winter personifies that.
Yes.
Floppy haired. He pretends to be
moody.
British, though he's not. Oh, who doesn't love a moody bad boy?
Every book he carries, it's deliberate. There is a point when the police are investigating.
He's not performative in that sense, because he genuinely cares about these texts.
Yes, but it's about which one, what he's holding.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he believes he understands the world deeply enough to operate outside its ethical constraints. He's very superior.
He's the leader of this group.
But his moral superiority, because he's so clever and he's so Greek in that way. The Greeks so believed that if you were clever, you did not need to be a part of life. And actually, one of the most important lines for me, and I found this on another Reddit thread on The Secret History, is "The Greeks have no devil," I said pedantically, which is Richard said in chapter 2 to a random girl at a party. And that is Henry. There is no such thing as bad if there's a justification.
And Henry, actually there are 2 murders in this book, and Henry orchestrates them both.
Yes, he does.
And his cool detachment and the way in which he sees these both as utterly logical is...
100%. I'm persuaded, Sophie. I literally was sitting there and be like, yeah, he has to die. And dark romance girls, this is your archetype. All the dark mafia romances.
Yeah, he's your guy.
Henry is that. This book caters to everyone.
It does.
Anyway,
it does.
It isn't explicit. I should say it's not an explicit book. Dark romance girls, you might be disappointed.
It's not explicit.
No, it's not.
Actually, I read somewhere, probably in a Donna Tartt interview, I did watch and read a lot of them. There was a point about there is no real...
It's really not explicit.
It really isn't, because that's the point. It would almost have been a distraction in some ways. Mm.
And then we come to Bonnie Corcoran, and Sophie and I really have had a fight.
So Bonnie Corcoran, he is brash, loud. He takes people out for lunch and then forgets his cards so that he doesn't need to pay for them. He seems, I don't know, a bit of a... He's initially very prat.
He's initially very funny and warm. He then puts Richard in a terrible position.
Is it a lovable, roguey kind of vibe? Possibly
perfect.
That.
You encapsulate him exactly. It's very clear his intellectual capacity is much lower than the rest of the group. It's not clear whether he's just haphazard and doesn't care or not. You then find out that he comes from dysfunction in a way that his parents pretend to have a lot of money and don't, and he has nothing, and Henry's had to help him out. And he's that comic grotesque character.
Well, we disagreed.
Oh, hugely.
And I want to make a point. I said earlier that I read this book really differently second time round, and that was largely to do with Bunny, because the first time I read The Secret History, I just thought Bunny was a moron. I just thought, I'm so with you, Henry. Not we should kill him, because that would be bad. But just that he got on my nerves. I found him so brash and so irritating. But coming back to this book now, you'll disagree with this. He discovers the secret that prior to his own murder, a farmer is murdered in a bacchanal, which Chaya has described, and we will talk about that a little bit more later in key moments. But after he discovers this and has this knowledge, he does become manipulative, and he knows he's got the power. Well, he thinks he has the power over the group. And in a way, I had a bit of admiration for him because he kind of steps away from the group. And I think at the time when I read it initially, I just thought he was pathetic. But now I'm like, good for him. Like, he's not just cowing to the group. He isn't, and he wasn't. But actually, this time around, I felt sorry for him in a way that I did not last time. And it's like, it's as you say, because when you see where he comes from.
And I'm going to explain that now.
You do actually feel quite sorry for him.
What Donna Tartt is able to do is tell you who these people are in minutes. And Bunny, he finds out that the group have murdered someone to transcend humanity. And he starts lording it over them, but blackmailing them. So suddenly he thinks, you're going to have to take me to Italy, and I want to go to the best hotels. And he gets thousands upon thousands of dollars for them, which is why I feel I don't feel any pity for him initially. I really still don't. I think he's a blackmailer. And we agreed on the point that he did not care one jot that someone had died. It could have been any crime that he wanted to lord over them. So his I agree he stands up to them, but he doesn't do that on moral grounds. He does it because now I get money.
But he's the only one who reacts to a murder. The others, even Richard says himself that he is able to completely forget about it. Bunny could not forget about it. And I hear what you're saying.
Only because he wanted to blackmail them.
But he still, clearly it stayed with him in a way that it didn't with the others who could commit this awful crime, and then off they went about their merry way.
And if you're interested in that is a foreshadowing to a theme and to a point we're going to talk about, which is groupthink and how good people can disassociate and things can be normalized, and literally this group don't care. And I totally concede the point, Your Honour, that Bunny...
Can we just make sure we have that on record? She conceded on the point.
I do concede that as much as he exploits it for his own financial gain, and I don't feel he cares about the person who's died, he does demonstrate horror.
It's still a reaction.
And the others don't.
It's a reaction.
You're absolutely right. Where he comes from, and I think this is really important in terms of the character analysis, is he comes from an Irish family that are desperate social climbers. And this is the line, you'll know that Bunny is murdered by the friends, and from what we've explained, and at his funeral, his father, Hugh, oscillates from abject grief to total happiness, really extremely. His mother just doesn't care. And what's genius is that he's in a bank and there's the Vanderfella, Mr. Vanderfella, which is obviously an amalgamation.
We only just realised that before.
Well, I did. You told me, in fairness to you, Vanderbilt and Rockefeller. And it's like, and he's sobbing. And then his son, his name, Hugh is the brother, apologies. So Hugh tells his father, Bunny's father, because Hugh is the brother, Dad, guess who I just saw? Guess who came? Mr. Vanderfella. The syllables of this illustrious name, one which the Corcorans invoked with very nearly as much respect as that of God Almighty, had, when uttered aloud, a miraculous effect of healing on Mr. Corcoran. He's here? Where? That's before the funeral. Yeah. And that is the family that Bunny has come from.
And I think that's why I felt sorry for him this time. And maybe I didn't pick up on the subtleties of that.
So subtle.
Last time.
She's amazing.
But I think for me, Bunny just feels through his flaws a bit more normal than the others, a bit more human in some ways.
But he utilises it to blackmail.
I know, but still, he's more
so
human.
Base. It's all about finance.
And I'd never be following Bunny around my college. I'd still be going for Henry. But I'm saying probably because Bunny's just a bit more normal.
Yeah, but he comes from they're trying to be the Kennedys, right?
Yeah.
But in fairness to him, he's been raised, he doesn't have the intellectual ability, and then he's been thrown into the wolves without any money, but he's being told that work is not good for you because who works? No one works. If you've got a trust fund, but you don't have the money. It's fascinating. Yeah. And then we've got Julian, who you've touched upon.
Julian Morrow. So Julian is the professor, the elusive professor who kind of acts as, I guess, the only real grown-up.
Agreed.
To much of this story. And he's been described before as an absent catalyst. He's very charismatic. There's something almost mythical about him.
Yes.
And actually, I would say in many ways, he's quite willfully blind to the behavior of the group.
Totally agree.
And he knows a lot more than he lets on. And actually, at the end, when the truth emerges of what's been going on, he kind of disappears to work for a wealthy family, I think in Africa. And there's no accountability from Julian. And actually, I haven't really thought about it until now, but ultimately he was almost, I don't know if we're saying he's like a fatherly figure.
But Henry says that.
Yeah,
I loved him more than my father.
No, but it's not that. But I mean, it's this kind of idea that actually he, in that role, he should have done more.
Definitely.
And he just doesn't. They just idealize him. And he's a passive enabler. And Richard also is very passive. The two of them are passive.
So then we've got the twins, Camilla and Charles.
I love that.
Lol.
Chaz and Cam.
So they are the Macaulay twins. They represent duality, decay. There's undertones of incest. Camilla, we are going to talk after themes about viewing this through a feminist lens, because Camilla is the only girl in this group. She's considered this ethereal waif who's like there, and Bunny makes horrible misogynist comments.
I have read, and I think you'll like this, that there is mention specifically of Camilla's grey eyes like Athena, like the palace.
Yes,
Athene.
I read that.
Yes, and I love that because that's not Aphrodite. Camilla's got more to her.
She does have more to her, but I don't think she has a lot of agency autonomy. Charles is the very, very overbearing twin, and that really incrementally grows. They're very clever. They're very obsessed with Julian. You think they have a lot of money. It turns out that they don't. And they are fascinating and deeply twisted. And there's really a lot of tension between the group and these twins. And then there is Francis.
And Francis, who he's kind of witty, stylish.
Very wealthy.
Very wealthy, but also like super insecure.
Yeah, has an estate in the country that they go to.
And he's gay. And it's that in itself is something that, it's funny because he's kind of open about it to a degree, like with those
only later on in the book.
Later on. But he really collapses after everything starts kicking off with the murder. He's a character who totally unravels. They all unravel in different ways. But I think he's kind of this charming eccentric, but there's a lot of trouble beneath the surface when it comes to Francis.
There is, and it's so interesting that you felt sympathy for Bunny, and I totally get why, because he is a product of the time, and we should say that this book, though written in the 1990s, does represent to me a much late, like that's what an earlier time, because when Richard and Bunny go out for a meal that costs an extortionate amount, then Bunny doesn't pay for, and then Henry comes and saves the day. Bunny makes terribly homophobic comments that Richard finds uncomfortable, even just as a straight man there, even in the time. And he also, when he starts exploiting the group, gets Camilla to do his ironing and makes horrible comments. Like, Bunny is really messed up.
Yeah, he's really messed up. He had to go.
Well, I mean, I'm not condoning murder.
No,
that is the main cast of characters. So now you know, and now if anyone makes a reference, and do you know what? Now it's almost passed me by because I read this so long ago. But like, there are books that I've read, and people will be like, "You're such a Henry Winter," and I almost forget who they were talking about. It's like, oh, that must be an actor. And it's so interesting that now you know who they are.
Yeah,
because they are referenced so much in culture.
Yes, they are,
aren't they? We now come to the key moment. So if you haven't read this book or you read it a long time ago, we're going to do a whistle stop few minutes so you know exactly what happens in this book.
So there are a lot of spoilers here. But that's okay.
Well, Bunny dies.
Bunny
I mean, Donna
dies, line one.
The beauty of this book is, even if you know exactly what happened, and okay, I've just hands up because I know I'm really weird, and I'm told all the time how weird I am.
Are you really weird?
I am. I don't like any type of anxiety or suspense. So not only did I know what was going on in this book, I then Wikipedia'd it to remind myself exactly what happens. And I hate a spoiler. I love a spoiler, and I hate not knowing. And even knowing exactly what was going to happen, I was reading this book anxious.
Yeah.
She's able to do that. So don't worry if you haven't read it.
You will still feel anxious.
You will still feel such anxiety and you will still be gobsmacked by her brilliance.
So we start Richard's arrival. He arrives in Hampton. He's wanted to go there. And what we see very, very quickly is the group.
Yes.
So Richard's first view of the group is literally as he starts the college, and he's heard about Julian Morrow and has been given lots of fascinating information about this professor being a brilliant man, or was he a fraud, that he actually didn't have a degree, that actually maybe he was a great intellectual and a friend to Ezra Pound, all sorts of things. But as he becomes more interested in him, he starts watching for him around campus. So I'm just going to read this point because it sums it up really well. The more interested I became, I began to watch for him and his little group of pupils around campus. 4 boys and a girl. They were nothing so unusual at a distance. At close range, though, they were an arresting party, at least to me, who had never seen anything like them, and to whom they suggested a variety of picturesque and fictive qualities. So we hear about the boys wearing glasses, tiny old-fashioned ones with round steel rims. The larger one was well over 6 feet. There's your tall, hunky Henry Winter with his square jaw, pale skin. And he breaks down in quite a lot of detail this group that he starts following around campus. And that's how we see Richard on the outside, pretty obsessed with this very tight-knit core elite group at his new college.
Richard arrives. He is then able to persuade his the college tutors to allow him to try and get into Julian's course. And then he starts flexing his intellectual muscles and showing the group that he actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to Greek. And he does. Julian allows him in. He is then brought into the group. He's socializing with them. He's feeling great. And then he is let in on the secret that the group, minus Bunny,
that's key,
killed a man trying to recreate the Bacchanal, trying to transcend humanity, trying to attain a level disassociating from the world.
It's Dionysus. Do you say Dionyson?
Yeah, like the divinity.
The ritual, a Greek ritual where they basically abandon all rational thought and they experience this like divine ecstasy. They kill a farmer, but they say they kill a farmer.
They do. And if anyone has ever seen, because sometimes I go on deep dives, you know, like the Christian evangelical, like, I will heal you. And people are like touching themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I can feel the spirit.
Yeah,
like,
this is hardcore, but it's like ancient Greek.
It's ancient Greek.
Mythological.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's not satanic. They don't believe in the concept of a Satan, like, is so far removed. It's more about like taking the base of what makes us human and transcending that through the like absolute most extreme form.
It's a big deal, this Bacchanal. It's a huge deal. It's actually in many ways a pivotal point because after this Bacchanal, this is where I think you get to see these characters for who they really are.
Totally.
And we obviously see everything through Richard's eyes, but he makes it very clear that he included, and although he wasn't at the ritual, but they tell him all about it in great depth, that actually you can just switch off from that.
Yes.
And off you go about your normal life.
He's not even that horrified. Okay, so key moments, because we're going to come back to the Bacchanal. I have a lot to say. So he finds out.
Bunny finds out.
And Bunny finds out. Bunny starts blackmailing and exploiting the group. He also, this is a college campus novel in a time, the college is very lackadaisical when it comes to drugs. Everyone's drunk all the time. They're smoking all the time. It's a utopia almost. And not from a drugs perspective. I don't condone drugs. But Bunny is really, really, really oscillating between being stable and not.
Yeah.
And
he's not
volatile.
Stable. He isn't.
And he's getting drunk and he's passing out and he's making comments. And we should say that the murder is covered in the local press and the chap is mutilated. That is a word that becomes very important.
Yes, it's the newspaper article describes the farmer as mutilated.
Yes.
In fact, I Yes, here it is. Mysterious death in Battenkill County. Battenkill County Sheriff Department, along with Hampton Police, are still investigating the brutal November 12th homicide of Harry Ray McCree, the mutilated corpse of Mr. McCree, a poultry farmer and former member of the Egg Producers Association of Vermont, was found upon his Mechanicsville farm. It goes on, and only then we have Richard who says, horrified, I leaned closer. The word mutilated had electrified me. It was the only thing I could see on the page, but Henry had turned the paper over and begun to study the other side. Well, at least this isn't a photocopy of a clipping. Odds are he did this at the library from the school's copy.
Because Bunny copies that.
Indeed.
And so they normalize it so quickly. So then you have this very quick, and again, I cannot explain to you, as much as there are classical references, as much as there's a lot of interiority, as much as there's reference to the weather, which we're about to talk about, or anything else, it's so propulsive. It's one after the other, bang, bang, bang. So there's the Bunny discovery, and then very quickly you're thinking, this kid's got to go. And there's the decision to kill, and then he dies.
The decision to kill Bunny is almost made as if, like, I don't know, deciding what you might have for lunch. It's inevitable, and they decide
how they do it.
Henry sort of says, he's sort of speaking about it, and it's just, we're just going to basically push him off a cliff edge into a ravine and move on.
Yeah, and they try and work out the logistics of it, like one would work out something very
plan for the
asinine,
day.
Indeed. Yeah. And then he does die, and then you've got the investigation and the unraveling of the search parties and the interest and the family.
And each of these characters unravels in a different way.
But you're waiting, just thinking about the investigation, like I was waiting on bated breath for that body to be found.
Yes.
And I'm like, I know where he is. I know what's going to happen. Why do I care? Because you want to see every single character, and you want to see, it's just so artfully done. Then you've got the funeral, and then you've got long-term fate. So that is the overview of the book. And, it doesn't look hefty. It looks like a normal paperback, but it is 626 pages.
I never actually, and it doesn't look too big.
The text is quite small. So it's like, it is a long book. And my favorite usually are short chapters. These are very long chapters, very long text of prose. And it's so propulsive.
It really is.
Isn't that
actually
amazing?
Would be so interested to know sort of what the average time it's taken people to read this.
Oh,
that would be so interesting.
Yes, because I've seen people in reviews say, I'm not a fast reader. I read this in a week, and usually I take months and months. I read it in one day.
Yeah.
I am a fast reader, but I tabbed and I let it percolate.
I reckon the average is pretty short. It's a really difficult book to put down.
It really is. So we come to narrative devices.
The weather. I mean, the weather is so central to this. And the book opens with the snow.
Because it's so atmospheric.
It's so atmospheric. And I think for years there's been talk of a film. I don't know if a film could ever do this justice in any way. But if there was a film, the weather would certainly be a huge part of it. The weather is used as a tool throughout to convey mood.
So true.
It's talked about. I mean, I would imagine on virtually every page, there is a reference to the weather, whether it's the sky being brilliantly sunny or the wind and the cold. And we've talked about Henry Winter. That's so symbolic of the character that Henry is, that he would get given the name of that particular season. It's just who he is. He is Winter.
It's interesting because I'm actually... And particularly I really feel like this book has reset my brain, because I've been in such a deep and dark fantasy, romantasy place where it's like, it's not a lot of interiority. It's not a lot of description. It's a lot of explicit content, and it's a lot of dragons, and it's a lot of death. And it's with this book, right? You talk about the weather. Think about how hard it is as a human being to convey what you want to convey to another human. And you are putting someone in someone else's head. And Donna Tartt, and she doesn't go on for hours about nature, right? It's like a line here, a line there, and it just places you immediately. So there's a moment in the book where she talks about a sunbeam and being able to see the dust particles. That is what I mean by AI never being able to do this, because only a human that's ever stared into space and seen dust particles and ever contemplated the world would be able to use it so insouciantly, in such a relaxed fashion. when she talks about the weather, or the damp, or the cold, or the this, it's incredibly visceral.
But you say relaxed fashion, and I agree with that to an extent, but I also think that with that, it is so deliberate.
Yes.
Her writing is so precise. I don't feel that any word is wasted on this. And the weather is not just used as some kind of like, I don't know, over the top description just to get some words in. It's all there for very specific reasons. It's been put there to make a point, and you feel that as a reader.
And nothing overwhelms it.
No.
Like the Greek references, like we've got some dark academia books and it's like people just trying to show how clever they are. But with weather, she's not trying to show how clever she is as a writer. It's, I can feel the cold.
Yeah.
Isn't that insane?
And actually, so will you as a reader when you're reading
Oh my God. There's a moment where in the summer, Richard, because he's so destitute and he has nowhere to go and his family, literally his parents despise him, has to go and live in this hippies like warehouse, and it's falling apart and there's a hole in the roof and he's freezing. And I literally felt cold reading it.
And what's so interesting, about that is that coldness, which actually really damages his health, as in he has to go to hospital. He is saved by Henry,
the saviour,
who comes in, and it's kind of against the weather, and here comes Henry to take you to, and I think that's a massive, that scene, that whole part of the story plays a massive part in their relationship between the two of them.
So now we come to the Bacchanal as another narrative device, and I'm not going to start giving you a long...
I need to say something about Bacchanal, and I just want to be open because I didn't even know what one was the first time I read this book. I think I just kind of, I think that's precisely the point. I just skated over it, didn't really understand. I was like, okay, it's like some kind of dance or something. And I still loved the book, but now, and you'll go into it, a Bacchanal, it's just gives this a whole other level of significance for me.
Yeah, it does. So it's the novel's philosophical and symbolic center. It represents the moment where the group attempts to be unencumbered from modern constraints, access a primal and pure feeling. This is where Euripides becomes essential. We've talked about the Bacchae. It's the attempt to deny or control the Dionysian forces, which results in destruction. And the key question is whether the experience is genuinely transcendent or it's completely delulu. Are they delusional? We never know. And it's the loss of self. And it's the boundary between civilization and savagery. And it's very interesting because you don't get a lot of detail about the Bacchanal that the group undertake. We know that there's a bit of sex. We know, which we never get to the bottom of, like who with who. We know that there's drugs. We know that there's alcohol.
Yes.
We know that then it then becomes a murder. At one point, Camilla thinks she's a deer. They think she's a goddess.
Yes.
But it's very surreal and there's not a lot of detail. And I think that really adds to the mystery and to the surrealist quality. But so the Bacchanal, even if you're not a classics reader and you're like, I literally don't care.
Well, I didn't really care first time around. I just didn't know and I couldn't stop reading, so I just carried on and it was fine.
Exactly, but it's a great narrative device. And this is what I'm saying about the catering, because literary fiends are like, oh, the weather, and you can use what was it called? Pathetic fallacy.
Pathetic fallacy.
A classicist would be like, oh, the Euripides, I totally see it. And for the propulsive thriller readers, they're like, whatever, doesn't matter what it is, because a murder's happened, and how could they do that? And it's so fascinating.
It is. It's all about this kind of desire to get to this kind of higher state, isn't it, in a way,
because they're
being
so superior. And then the next one is groupthink,
which is kind of linked to the Bacchanal as well, because they've kind of gone into this. We know them from...
Explain what groupthink is.
Groupthink is like herd mentality, essentially.
Yes.
It's herd mentality. I've said this before, but it's when you go into the round table in Traitors and you're sure you're going to nominate someone, but then other people nominate others and you just follow them and you end up going completely against what you'd thought because you're following the group and you almost don't realise it's happened.
I love that you're referencing the Traitors. I was thinking much, but yes, I was thinking much wider.
On a basic level.
I was thinking
but you can have
the Holocaust.
You can, exactly.
Right? How did millions... No, but it's like the slavery. When Amalia, my daughter, was like, how could anyone think that another person was not as good as nice as them because of the colour of their skin? And like, you're so right. But how many people just took that for granted as Bible, as canon?
It's that herd mentality when you're literally following the flock and without very much thought at all.
And that has its
The flock are doing it, I'm just going to do what they're doing.
Exactly. And that has its roots because in The Secret History is very much Orwellian as well. The Greek class system is very important. It's a sealed ecosystem. There is no Cromwell superseding boundaries. It's shared language, shared text, shared intellectual superiority that is self-sustaining. Dissent becomes not just disagreement, but betrayal.
What I find interesting about this group, they are so tight, as in initially they are impenetrable. The idea is that it is the 5 of them
against the world
with Professor Julian Morrow, and no one is easily let in.
No one's good enough.
No one is good enough.
Yes.
So they don't necessarily want the herd. They don't want the riffraff. But if you're in, you are part of their herd and you're not getting out.
And it's as this Reddit user says, the most important line, the Greeks have no devil. Why? Because if you are morally superior, if you are intellectually superior, morals become an afterthought, right? You can justify anything. They justify.
Well, that's why they had to get rid of Bunny, and anything. That's fine.
There's so much in classical history that we think, how could anyone have possibly justified it? Obviously, slavery is a hugely important one, or any kind of the genocides, anything like, you know, how could anyone justify this, aka the Holocaust? And that concept, the seduction of belonging of groupthink, the herd mentality, and how it influences people, I think is an important narrative tool. It's obviously also a theme. So if you're writing an essay on this, you can use it in so many ways. It's so multifaceted, but I think she uses it as a narrative tool.
It's actually an interesting point because Donna Tartt, and as I said, I'd never heard her speak before, but she's from the South and she has like the most, I mean, her Southern drawl is unbelievable. It's just worth listening to her talk. And she grew up at a time when she says she remembers hospitals being segregated, as in there were separate entrances, depending on whether you were black or white. And that feeds into this massively, this whole idea of like, who's in the group, who's outside of it. And that's a theme that it's not even a theme, it's just embedded into the very heart of this book.
I agree. We now come to themes. I know we've obviously picked up on a lot, but we're going to give you these headlines and we're going to look at them in short order because the novel's exploration of beauty is not superficial. And actually, it's so interesting because I almost feel like I'm doing the novel a disservice because when I was sitting there reading this, I was not thinking about the themes. I was just enjoying the story, the unraveling, the psychology.
Because it reads like a thriller.
It really does. And it's only afterwards. And if you're engaging with this on a much deeper intellectual level, these are the things that maybe on a third reread, you'd be thinking about in a much more like thoughtful and deeper fashion. So you've got beauty and terror, and beauty is justification for violence. This is where Nietzsche comes in. It's that aesthetic philosophy. It's, you know, beauty is such an important aspect. Everyone's looks, everyone's attractiveness is very much at the heart. And it's so interesting because there's the philosophical reason of why that's being done, but it's also like we live in such an aesthetic world now that I'm like, obviously I need to know if they're hot or not, which is ridiculous.
It's like morality versus aestheticism.
Do you know what? Can I just tell you that this is so interesting? Because I remember reading a study, because I am that girl and I am that nerd and I am a criminal lawyer. There was a study done in America on objectively attractive people, and there were certain parameters, like the men were over 6 foot, the women had certain like facial features,
symmetry,
and
or
the
whatever.
Sentences and the conviction rate of attractive people versus non-attractive people will blow your flipping mind.
It doesn't shock me, but do you remember that hot felon? Remember Jeremy Meeks came out of prison and became a superstar because he was so attractive?
We will forgive people, and that is everything that the Greeks are about.
Jeremy Meeks, who had a child with Chloe Green.
If you were beautiful, you transcended class, you transcended intellect. It doesn't matter.
As does Henry.
And this is, well, Henry, he cares about the intellect.
No, he does, but I'm saying that he is that character. He is beauty over morality.
Yes. And it's so important. Like Julian really, like that's important to him as well, beauty and art. So beauty and terror, and beauty as justification for violence, and that aesthetic experience that overrides ethical boundaries is a really important ideological foundation in this book.
Alienation and belonging, we've touched on, but that's a huge one. It's all about groupthink and community and being on the outside looking in, and you know how, you know, people's innermost desires to just belong. Even when you see the red flags, you still just want to belong.
Oh my God, the red flags that one can forgive because you want to belong.
Yeah.
And do you know, I say this to my kids because they're like, why do we need to learn Latin? Why are you shouting at us? And that, not shouting, but like speaking Latin to us.
Hear you shout
like,
in
please
Latin.
go away. And I'm like, kids, you might find yourself in a situation where the fact that you're able to say a word in Latin or able to say, oh, I learnt the classics, I have literally been accepted. Like, I have been in such elite circle, like not personally, but like in rooms, like barristers, it's mostly very wealthy or very, very educated people, very privileged because it costs so much money to do the bar and then there's so little pupillage. And the fact that I was able to be like, oh yeah, Latin, I did that. They all assume I've gone to a phenomenal private school. It's that groupthink, it's that belonging, and it's exactly with them. Richard is only accepted because he can impress them with his Greek.
Yeah.
Am I Richard
And
Bacon?
how actually your desire to belong, this whole thing, it can be so skewed that it just leads to complete moral compromise.
Yes. Anyway.
Because you're so desperate to be part of it.
And that leads us so beautifully to moral relativism and elitism. That is, which you've just talked about and I've just like almost intimated, right? That I'm not, why was I considered elite? Because I'd learnt Latin.
Yeah.
Like I was just a nerd. Right. Then you've got the classical world versus modernity, the obsession with ancient Greece, purity, order, transcendence. It's, yes.
And
it's
intellectual elitism as a theme in and of itself, I think.
Yes.
And the danger and whatever that surrounds that.
And the fact that nothing worthwhile is modern.
Yeah, clearly in this.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then we come to fate, inevitability, and tragedy, which is obviously draws its structural parallels to the Greek tragedy. Hamartia is the fatal flaw. That is a phrase. Intellectual arrogance. No alternative ending feels possible. It's almost Shakespearean, and that is suffused within the text.
This book really...
It's worth the hype, dude. That's the headline. AI could never.
For me, it's not just worth the hype. There are so many things about this book that really mean that it truly does stand alone as a piece of literature. I don't think there's anything quite like it. And yes, I want to do more of these deep dives and we will love doing them. But I don't know if there will be any other book that's quite as unique as this one.
No, I agree.
In their standing.
Because that's dystopian and dystopia's everywhere.
This
it's
is
so
almost,
true.
Because
this isn't a thriller.
And it blurs
it's not a thriller.
lines.
And it's not classical.
You can't really pigeonhole it.
No, you can't. You can't. And it's so interesting because when we're looking at these themes, you know, fate, inevitability, I almost questioned whether this is fantasy because the group genuinely believe that that they have transcended humanity in the background. And you're like, maybe they did.
Yeah, maybe they did.
Because it doesn't make sense. How could they all believe that they did, but they weren't drunk or high? Anyway, I think the advanced critical lens for those that if you are doing, and I think that I would be fascinated to know if one could do a degree and do a module on the secret history, because I would first of all definitely sign up, but also it's that important a text. If you were doing like a feminist reading of this, Camilla is the object versus agent, the male gaze dominance. Bunny is so misogynist. Even Julian is so, you know, disparital.
Yeah, I'd want to do a lot more delving into Julian if I come back to this for a third time, which I possibly could.
Because there's such like that, like the disparagement of women and education, and the women also in the book, like Richard's mother is abused by the husband that is in a throwaway reference. I almost want to say to Donna's Tartt, like, I'm not saying that she's minimizing like female violence, but there are so many references. Like Camilla is abused by Charles that you find out in the end, physically and sexually. You've got Bunny's mother, who's an absolute tyrant.
Oh my
but you
goodness,
think, what's her life like with her husband? She's drugged up to the eyeballs. Then you've got Bunny's views on women and like, you're only worthwhile if you're hot or can iron my shirt. And it's like, it's almost peppered in and it's never explored.
You know what's interesting? I've read that actually, so Donna Tartt wrote this from the perspective of a man as Richard. And actually,
good point.
I mean, she does it brilliantly. You'd never think that there was anything sort of female about that. She gets the voice completely spot on. He is 100% Richard, a man, you believe it.
Yes.
And she has made the point before that female eyes would not have worked in this story because Bunny would have behaved so differently towards Richard if Richard had been a woman.
He wouldn't have valued her at all.
Exactly. So that's because people have asked her, well, why did you write as a man? Like, you've only got Camilla as a woman. And she said it just the dynamic would not have worked. And of course she's right. And she would be right. It's her book.
And I have to mention, like, R.F. Kuang's book, Catabasis, which did not enjoy hugely.
I read Yellow Face and you know how I feel about that.
I loved Babel and I'm a huge Kuang fan, but like Catabasis tried to be The Secret History and ended up being a thesis on philosophy. But what it did do very well, shout out, and I really think it did, is showed the elite academic structures and the misogyny and how much women have to do to even be heard still in these spaces. And that is also what she achieves in this book. And maybe that's a really important part of the male gaze dominance. And then you also have the queer subtext, the hidden identity, the coded vulnerability of Francis. Charles is having a kind of clandestine here and there dalliance with Francis, and you're like not sure whether he's...
And his sister? There's incest here. Classical. Exactly.
But that, again, it's only mentioned very near the end, so it's not like you're not... And by the end, I wasn't even horrified because they're such bad people. No, you're kind of like,
it's inevitable.
Good God. And like the repression, you're like, at the end, you're like, was Charles just so deeply repressed at his homosexuality that was part of his dysfunction and the instability that he represents? But the queer subtext is really important.
And it's so important. And that could be explored in its own episode.
It could, but it's never really expanded upon. Like, she doesn't elucidate upon Francis' queerness and Charles and him and the fact that Francis tries it on with Richard in a very subtle way.
Yes.
It's so interesting. And this is a point that the classic, like the Greek world, homosexuality and paedophilia was a vital part of their society structure. Obviously, we have the Song of Achilles here that explores that beautiful relationship, but they are also so American in that time where it's like horrendous to be gay.
Yeah, we can't forget where they are and at what time they are living. So no matter how much they would ultimately like to be part of this Greek world, they are in America in the 90s and it's a totally different vibe.
And the clash between those civilizations is really interesting because it doesn't help Francis at all. You would think it would. You would think people in the Greek mindset.
That day and age.
No. And then class analysis, wealth as insulation, richer as the outsider trying to assimilate. And obviously from a philosophical perspective, there is a lot of engagement with classical philosophy, but I will say this again, it's a throwaway comment here or there. And if you're a philosopher, you'll love every moment. And if you're not interested, you won't even notice it. But Plato, the idea that intellectual elites are closer to truth. Aristotle, tragedy as a means of catharsis. Nietzsche, which is, can intellectualism replace morality? Is evil aestheticizable? Are the characters tragic or simply privileged or cruel? And that Nietzschean framework, the position of Henry as attempting that synthesis but failing catastrophically. And you have all the classical references to the language, the tragedy structure, the ritual, and the heroic ideal.
But if you don't want that, you're still going to love this book.
It's like any Netflix drama.
It really, really is. And that's why we've had to do this. And that's why it really is a standalone. And actually looking at this discussion and having, looked into Donna Tartt. And I mean, I really recommend watching what you can of Donna Tartt online because she is such an interesting, compelling, intriguing character. But I think of everything that I've seen, read and heard of her, there is only one single thing that she has said that I probably disagree. Well, I definitely disagree with.
I'm fascinated. I don't know this.
And she has said that no truly great novels are written by anyone under 40.
Did she say that?
And she wrote this. Well,
how old was she?
She published this at 29.
That's actually
so there we go. I mean, and
she was
29.
And she wrote this.
Yeah, and it took her 10 years.
I actually don't think she's
I don't know
mortal.
when. I know she's working on another book, but she writes a book every 10 years. 10 years. So we should be due one probably in.
Can we get her on
not
the pod?
Too long? Yeah. I'm just going to give her a call. It's fine.
Can you imagine?
Donna, we're after you.
Its cultural impact really can't be overstated, and there's so many reasons. Again, I don't think it's dark academia. I think it's so much more than that. And dark academia wishes. It endures because it's not about appearance. And I'm sorry, it's as contemporary as the day it was written. We're all obsessed with aesthetics.
And I think, look, actually, if you do go and if you've read it amazing. I'd still read it again. If you haven't, I hope that I hope that you might want to read it now. Certainly talk about it, even if you haven't.
Yeah.
But we've actually brought a few books here today that we think you might love too, if you've enjoyed this discussion or you've loved The Secret History.
I've got loads. If We Were Villains, definitely, because
people say
if we were villains,
I actually haven't read If We Were Villains.
Like Donna Tartt's A Secret History. I mean, it's literally on the cover. When friends become enemies, there's no limit to damage they do. It's set in a elite conservatory. A very new one is Weavingshaw, which is by Heba Al-Wasity, and that is like dark academia, but also fantasy.
I had thought, some of the fascinating, beautifully written Greek stories by Madeline Miller may well appeal to you.
That's
whether
if you're
Circe,
interested
if you're interested in the classics after reading this. And one I picked up that actually I think you'll really enjoy if you've enjoyed The Secret History is Penance by Eliza Clarke, which is
so different.
Yeah, it's so different, but yet it's got that same element of a murder and a group being involved and how they react to it afterwards with all the propulsion of a kind of gripping true crime novel. I just think it's absolutely brilliant.
It is amazing. The Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake is very dark, very like complex magical systems, but it is considered dark academia. Les Bardugo is more magical surrealism, like realism, but like very clever and very funny. And then you have to mention Babel, which is by R.F. Kuang, which I love. It's set in Oxford. It's all about translation and what gets lost. And it's just beautiful and brilliant.
And actually, I should say, if, like me, you are not so au fait with the classics and haven't read much classical text or anything like that, unlike my learned friend over here, I really, really enjoyed Stephen Fry's two-part miniseries, I guess, called Mythos and Heroes. These are just brilliant. He basically goes through all the characters in the classics. I mean, it's brilliantly funny. I adored these books and learned a hell of a lot. So I actually would highly, highly recommend both of these.
I found this quote. It's nobody said anything. Dust motes floated in a sunbeam. And it's such a critical moment. And you're like, Charles is in hospital. Everything's falling apart. And in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words, I felt like I was in the room. I don't know how she does it. I don't know if this novel is a critique of elitism. I actually don't think it is. I don't know if it's complicit in romanticizing it, because it's so multitudinous and it's so layered that I don't think anyone would be able to argue that it's just one thing. I don't think she's critiquing eliteness. I think she's mocking it, but I also think she's showing how important it can be.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too.
I don't think anyone, I don't like that when I see people being like, for me, The Secret History is, and then it's like 3 words. I'm like, have you read the book? It's so much more than anything that we could say.
But we've tried. We've tried.
Thank you so much for sticking with us.
If you are still here, your medal will be coming in the post, but we genuinely appreciate it. And as we said earlier, if there are any other books that you'd be interested in hearing us deep dive, we'd love to know which titles you'd like us to take a look into.
Got to be an Atwood in there.
Yeah, or a few. But thank you so much for listening and see you next time.